If you want your viewers to take an action as a result of your video that they're watching on YouTube, then the thing you must do is elicit some kind of emotion, some kind of reaction that prompts them to take you up on the offer that you're providing, or to watch the next video, or to subscribe, or want to watch more from you, or to enable notifications, or sign up for your lead magnet, or whatever the case might be. Emotion is what gets people to take action. It's not the quality of your information. It's not the 3 bullet points that you have for your content all starting with the same letter. It's not that you had some sort of research that no one else typically includes. It is, does someone feel something? And the deeper the emotion, the bigger the feelings, the bigger the action you can prompt them to take. And in this episode, we're going to dive into that deeper than I think I've ever dove into that before with someone here I want to introduce you to explain exactly how that works and give us a very practical model that we can use and take in our very next videos to prompt our users and our viewers and our fans and our audience to more action.
Hey, welcome to the Video Creators Podcast. You know how you put a lot of time and energy into your YouTube channel for not nearly enough growth? Yeah, we get it. We're here today to help you change that. If you're trying to accelerate your channel's momentum, become more profitable, and change the lives of more people than ever before, today's episode will help you move forward with confidence. So far, our team is responsible for helping clients generate over 20 billion views on YouTube. And now to help you, here's the Video Creators team.
Hello, creators. My name is Tim Schmoyer. Welcome back to another Video Creators Podcast episode like we do here every week, just to help you get more views, grow more followers, get more subscribers, ultimately grow the business that you have around your YouTube channel so you can reach more people and change their lives. And today we want to start with changing your life, teaching you this process, this method that you can use to grow your channel and by getting people to take the action you want them to take. And it's actually relatively simple to understand, but not as simple to execute, which we'll get into that here in a second. So a few months ago, I was speaking at a conference and I heard this lady speak there, Tamsen Webster, and her topic was about how to use emotion to drive action. And I was like, oh, this is going to be good. So I went to her session and not only is she a phenomenal speaker and very engaging, but I was also like, this makes sense. And a lot of it aligns with some of the things we've already been teaching here at Video Creators, but brings more color to it and fills in some gaps and actually takes it to the next level in a lot of ways. And so after hearing her speak, I was like, I need to get this lady on a podcast episode. We need to talk because this has been so fantastic, so helpful. I'm like, I want to take this to the next level. So I got her scheduled for an interview, and Delana is one of the other YouTube strategists on my team here, in case you're not familiar with us as much. Welcome, by the way. Delana and I sat down and talked with Tamsen about this very thing. Tamsen is a message strategist. She's a speaker. She's an author. And when we sat down and talked, I was like, hey, how do you use emotion to drive action? Specifically for us, for people who are trying to grow YouTube channels. And we had a great conversation on talking about this from a brand level, as well as from an individual specific video level that you can use in your very next video and use to grow your channel, your audience, and your business overall. So let's cut to that conversation. We're going to cut out all the other stuff that we normally do here, the normal segments, and just highlight this interview with Tamsen. Here we go. Tamsen. Hey, good to meet you.
It's good to meet you,
Yeah,
Tim.
thanks for being on our podcast and
I'm
our show.
Yeah.
So I saw your session title here yesterday. Yeah, not yesterday. I saw it before, but I'm like, emotion, and that's
the logic of emotion.
The logic, those two things
Yes,
together.
I know. That's what caught me, is that I was like, so many people think of like logic and emotion as opposites.
Right.
And you were like, the logic of emotion. And I was like,
Wait
you.
a minute. Yes.
Already, I'm bought in. Yes, I agree.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I spent a lot of time thinking about why people do things and what has to happen in their heads. And you're right. There seems to be, Delana, this tension between, either there's emotion or there's logic.
Yeah.
And from both my experience and my research, it turns out that like emotion is the result of logic, but it doesn't feel like it because that logic is happening actually pre-consciously.
Yes.
Yeah.
And because it happens pre-consciously, you're like, you don't realize that it's logical, right? So
Yeah.
there's this weird kind of logic, emotion, logic process that happens.
Yeah.
Like there's this piece that's before, and that produces how you feel, and then how you feel makes you then usually justify or rationalize whatever you've decided. So it's fascinating.
I
love
deal
it.
with a lot of anxiety, and I have learned over the past year that I used to say that anxiety doesn't follow logic, like it just feels like it's, but now I was like, I've come to the realization just within the past like month, I was like, no, it has a logic that I'm not consciously aware of yet.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And so I was like, it's bringing attention to something that I don't know what it is, and I need to figure out what it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
So-
Yes. And speaking as a former panic disorder person, I had one for 17 years. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That it's helping you see something. There's something in your brain going, for me personally, it was like really any strong emotion. Like my reaction was just like, because I would have some kind of strong emotion and that would create a reaction in my body, and then my brain would be like, oh crap. But when you could go back and go, well, actually for me this is a normal reaction, first of all. Second, I came to understand that the panic cycle was a result of what I was thinking in response to that physical thing.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, well, if I thought my way in, I think my way out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And turns out you can.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to hear how you use logic and emotion and how we could apply that to people who are growing YouTube channels.
Yeah.
To not just use what most people creators do, they just use the logic, right? And they're just like, hey, subscribe because I make gaming videos, or because I'm a family vlogger, or because like whatever. And the emotion is completely separated. And I want to hear your perspective on how we can use both to grow our channels and spread our message. But first, who's Tamsen? And tell us your story.
Oh, yes. You're like, hey, well, I had a panic disorder.
Tell us your backstory.
Oh
my gosh.
And what is a message strategist? So if you could fill us in on
all of that. So let me start with the message strategist piece, and then I'll use that as the springboard to everything else.
Sure.
So for me, a message strategist, what I do as a message strategist, I see it as bridging the gap between who you are and the brand that produces and what you need to talk about day to day.
Yes, this is
Right?
We
so
have
good.
lots of internal conversations about that lately.
Yep.
We might need to talk offline.
All right, sounds good. I mean, so this gives you a little bit of background. I've spent most of my life kind of sitting between what on the surface seem like really different groups of people. And you could put it as the difference between like logical people and emotional people, for instance. So I was both a member of like the arts crowd in school, but was also the manager of the varsity boys baseball team. When I went to college, I studied business, and I also studied American Studies and Art History. And then when I went to grad school, I again studied business and arts administration. And so I've always kind of loved being in a situation where I could see both sides and see what connects the two. So eventually that led me to just various careers, usually in marketing and brand strategy. First in organizations, worked for a lot of nonprofits, and then in agencies. And what I saw over and over and over again was that there was always a breakdown between the brand that the organization wanted, the brand that they had, and then how to actually kind of talk about that thing every day.
Communicate it in a way that means something to people very succinctly. Clearly.
And beyond just a tagline, right? Because I would see that happen and I saw it from both sides. I was in organizations where we would hire a really expensive brand strategy team, and then I was on really expensive brand strategy teams, and every time there would always just break down. Like maybe you came up with a great positioning or a tagline, but then one of the jobs I had before I went out on my own was as the director of digital strategy for an advertising agency.
Okay.
And so at that point, I was responsible for social media marketing, community development, and this is where a lot of my work now started, because I was like, I can't just repeat your tagline every day. Like I can't. So we need to figure out a way to figure out what's happening behind that brand and behind that tagline, so that we can communicate it. Yeah. So I joke that really what I am is an English to English translator.
Love
but
that.
I think what I do essentially is translate from brand language to people language.
Yes.
And help companies and organizations do that.
So one of the things we do when we first start working with a YouTube channel is it needs to make sense. And most creators don't think of this intuitively at first. They're just like, I like to create stuff, throw it against the wall, and see what happens. But one of the things that's really important for a channel to grow is that a first-time viewer can come to that channel and quickly be like, oh, I get it. I understand what this channel and this brand is all about. And if that is confusing in any way, or if it's like not clear who it's for and what value I'm going to get from this, like we just see that's really hard for those channels to grow. And so what most creators do is they're like, subscribe because I do this thing.
Right.
And the problem is like, you and literally thousands of other channels do that thing.
Yes.
Right? It doesn't separate you
at
all. And so we try to like get them into like a creed or a belief or something that separates them. What advice would you have for a creator who's like in that spot and they're like, I'm just pitching myself like subscribe because I do gaming videos or because we do vegan recipes or whatever. You know?
I mean, I love the way you think, because in my experience, it's to take a step beyond Simon Sinek's like start with why. I don't actually agree with him that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. They buy why you do what you do the way that you do it.
They buy what? Say that again.
So they buy what you do the way that you do it. They buy the why you do what you do the way that you do it.
Oh, that's actually true.
Right? If you think about it, because it's, and I love, I mean, and I don't disagree with him from an internal perspective, why it's so important to understand from an internal perspective within an organization or within a creator themselves, like, okay, well, why am I doing this? What's my big why?
Sure.
But that why actually doesn't translate usually all that well outside of that unless somebody needs the what. Now, what's missing, and what I was hearing and what you're saying, is a lot of people miss that connection between the two. So, okay, here's your big why, and here's what you do, but why do you do what you do the way do you do it? Like, what's the why behind your how?
Oh,
do you see what I'm saying? Like, there's a very distinctive reason why we do what we do the way that we do it. So there's, and that's the first time I've ever said it that way. I think it's important to understand.
We recorded it. You can use it later.
But I think that's it. Like, Simon really talks about the why behind your what, and I think it's really important that you also articulate the why behind your how. And that, I think, is the clearest I can say it.
So when a creator is trying to make their channel make instant sense to like their perfect viewer that they're trying to attract, and they're just stuck on like, here's what we do. What you're saying is you got to also give them the information of this is why I do it the way that I do.
So
you can't just be like, I'm a gaming channel, for example.
No,
you guys, I'm a gaming channel because blank.
So I say that your minimum viable message is something I call a through line, a red thread through line, which is, I wrote a book on this, my approach. But to me, that minimum viable message, that shortest piece of information that you could give someone about why you do what you do the way that you do it, should be like old tweet length or less, so 140 characters or less.
Old tweet, I remember.
And I know,
I remember when it was a text message to 0404 on my
wow, I don't remember that.
T9 cell phone. Yeah,
nice. But that 140 character sentence or phrase or tagline or whatever as a place to start should contain something that your audience wants via a means they don't expect.
Ooh, which sparks curiosity, which gets into the first level of emotion.
You got it.
Oh, all right.
You got it.
Going.
Right. So if I say that someone says, okay, well, what do you do? And I say, well, I help experts drive actions from their ideas. So that's the what.
The what.
By helping them build the stories people will tell themselves about those ideas. So talking about helping, like I'm going to help, I would help a creator say, all right, you've got this audience. We're going to build the story the audience is going to tell to themselves about you. Not your story, but your audience's story about you. Because that's the story that matters, right?
Yeah.
Like, my story about what I do doesn't matter. You have to be able to go, okay, well, the rationalization, the explanation that I'm going to give to myself about why I am or am not going to follow you or watch your stuff or consume your content. The whole baseline of the work that I do is to say, well, let's just build the story they're going to tell themselves about that. Because then we're just skipping that. Well, that's a whole process.
That's the whole book.
Go buy it. And I don't want to be mysterious about it, but it really does start. So I can tell you, it starts with first understanding what is that thing that your audience wants, right?
Okay,
they want videos on a thing, but what specifically and it's not this first thing is not beautiful. This is not where you're going to differentiate most of the time.
Okay.
It is literally what is the question that they're answering, right? They want to know, I saw that Diana Gladney was here, right? And the reason why I know her is because I had a Canon EOS M50 and I'm like, how do I use it as a webcam?
Nice.
And so by what is it specifically that they're looking for? So I talk about it in the book is what is a question that your audience is currently asking for which your content, your channel is an answer. Like just high level.
Yeah.
What are they trying to do? And again, don't get fancy about this. This is not because back to the curiosity piece, this is to establish relevance. They need to know, so does YouTube and their algorithm, that you are very likely to have the answer to what they're looking for. So that's the first piece. And it's from there, then you start to find the things that are going to differentiate you. So the next step, so I call that question the goal. That's where it starts.
Okay.
That's because any story, this is all based on story.
Right. That's the desire.
That's the desire. Any story starts the minute we know what somebody wants.
Right.
So your audience will get engaged when they see something they want in what you're producing.
Yep.
All right, the next element of story is a problem that the audience didn't know about, right? Or the character doesn't know about that gets in the way of their goal. When we translate this to a message and to this process, what we're looking for here, this is where you start to differentiate a little bit. It's starting to say, hey, most people approach it from this angle or think about it this way or focus on this aspect of it. I focus on this aspect of it. So for instance, I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine and she works with salespeople to help improve their sales calls. And I knew where she was going, but I was like, okay, well, if they want to improve the success of their sales calls, what do most people focus on? She said, well, most people focus on convincing other people that they're the right answer. I said, okay, but that's not necessarily wrong. I mean, eventually someone does have to say yes, but where do you need them to go? And she's like, well, I think of a successful sales conversation as more of a conversation. So we set up this tension between convincing and a conversation. So that's that second part where we set up, I call it a two-part problem, where you basically say, what's the current point of view and what's the new point of view? Right. There's much more to this.
So it's kind of like with our brand, most people expect us, Delana, to be like, we help you grow on YouTube, and then they insert like keywords, or they insert search, or they insert and we're like, no, we help you grow on YouTube by quickly establishing a human connection with someone that makes them feel something so that they want to keep watching more.
Right. So you connect. Right. So many of the other folks that you could talk to are really going to focus on metrics and metrics alone. Yeah. Maybe you help them focus on the meaning behind those metrics.
Yes. Yes, exactly what we do.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I've said that to other people before. They're like, okay, Tim, if you could like summarize, actually yesterday, if you're going to summarize like what makes you different, like what's your approach to YouTube, your methodology for growth? I'm like, I would summarize it in a nutshell by saying, we help creators to be able to quickly make a human emotional connection with a viewer that then leads to the signals that YouTube's algorithms wants and leads to growth and engagement, and it's what gets them to click and all that kind of stuff, as opposed to like just going after keywords and stuff. And so and that's a very platform agnostic type of approach, actually, because it works on any place where people consume content. Really,
that's right. That's why I do the work that I do the way that I do it. Which is, listen, you can be social media, it can be an investor conversation, it can be a brand campaign. Fundamentally, this is podcast. This is just how people process information and make a decision. So if you can align with that, then you're going to be more successful. Right. And what you just mentioned really leads to that third piece, right? So if you're focused more, if you're saying, hey, the problem is when you're trying to grow your YouTube channel, if you focus more on metrics than the meaning behind it, it's the problem. Yet we can agree it's true. And this is what the talk yesterday was all about. Like, what is that now silent assumption? What is that true thing that you can say? And this is the third piece, this truth, that gets them to go, oh, of course, because if I don't focus on meaning, I'll never be able to grow. So the challenge for you two would be to say, what is that assumption that's just core to both of you, right? That connects meaning and growth, right? Or meaning and connection with growth. Like, that's the thing that you have to surface. And then once you find those three things, then you have and so that's why with your brand, we help people grow their YouTube channels by, maybe it's human connection or whatever, but it might be informed by that.
And then when people have that truth moment, and the third, that's when they're like, that's like an aha moment, an epiphany.
Correct.
That's like and that's also an emotion now. It's not like, I understand how you do it.
That's
it's
right.
Like I understand now.
That's right.
And it's way more intrigue if you could put intrigue on a scale of like 1 to 10. Instead of it being like, I get it, it's like a 1. But now you're like, epiphany moment, that's like an 8.
It's all baked into it because, so a couple things happen. One is when you establish that very first thing, that goal question, that's relevance and curiosity, because you want to pick one of those questions that's either an urgent issue, like it was for me with Diana. I'm like, how do I make this thing work as a webcam? With my, at the time, ancient Mac, which didn't want to do it. Or a persistent irritant, right? It's just something that's they just want to get better at it and they can't. Establishing that question establishes relevance, which creates curiosity, because if they've got an urgent issue and if they've got, or it's a persistent irritant, and you are representing that you have an answer to that question, they're gonna lean in. Then with that 2-part problem, now you've introduced something else they didn't know about. You've anchored it in something that they agree with. They're like, I'm focused on metrics. And you're like, and there's meaning behind those metrics. But you've just created another curiosity gap. And they're like, wait, why is meaning important?
Sure.
Right? And then you introduce that truth. And what that creates, it's not anything I talked about yesterday, but it creates something that's called cognitive dissonance. Basically, it's a very uncomfortable feeling for people. And but it's a feeling, right? And it is just like curiosity. It's a drive state. Like you won't let dissonance stand. It's really uncomfortable.
You have to resolve it.
You have to resolve it.
Yeah.
And so that's where that fourth piece, that change you represent in the market, comes into place, because you're like, and so that's why this is our resolution. And if they've agreed all the way along, which is really what this is all about, and then by the time you get there, they're like, of course.
Sure.
Now, it doesn't mean you're going to get everybody, but it means you're going to get the people who you're most for, right? Because you're saying, well, we're for people who are asking this question. We're for people who agree that there is both meaning and metrics, that those two have a relationship. And we're for people who agree with you on why that meaning is important, without you having to convince them. And so if they've agreed with all of those things, well, for all the reasons I talked about in the talk yesterday, if you agree with all of the elements of a conclusion, it's kind of hard to disagree with the conclusion.
So, I'm in.
And that's really where the work comes in. So is it simple? Yes. Is it easy?
Simple to understand, but easy to,
Which is why I wrote the book.
Yeah, exactly.
Here you go.
I think I know I'm going to listen to you on the airplane on the ride.
So we don't have an audiobook yet. I'm actually recording it. I'm recording it next week.
Oh, you are?
I am.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So
and I'll be like, I know her.
Exactly. I'm recording it next week, and then I'm gonna when it comes out, I'm gonna re-release the book with an extra bonus chapter that it got cut from the original version. So just kind of get an extra boost for it. So there you go.
Cool.
Yeah, I didn't do it at the same time that I wrote the book, but an audiobook publisher reached out after it was published, actually, and they were like, "Could we do it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So now it works out that I think the audiobook will come out about a year after the books did.
So when there's a creator who's hearing all this, they're like, "Okay, I get all this, but Tamsen, I just make videos about taxes or about spreadsheets,
No, you don't.
or just like, there's nothing intriguing here. All I want to do is show people how to merge these cells and make that formula, blah, 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 blah." Does this apply to them? Like, what would you say to that person?
100% applies to them, because for the very point that you all just said, there's other people out there making videos about spreadsheets. Why did they feel compelled to make some videos too? Right. Some people are going to be like, just because I wanted to, but there's going to be something. They're probably looking at those other videos and they're like, but they don't do it this way, or they're not for these people. And that's my whole point. Like, you do what you do the way that you do it for a reason.
It takes some introspection then, I think, to figure
it
that out.
does.
It's not like here you go, this is how you do it.
But if it's important to you, in my opinion, is that if it's that important to you, you'll do that work. Because you 100% have a unique worldview. Everybody does.
Yeah.
And so even if what you do is not unique, the way that you do it may be, and
Yes.
even if it isn't, why you do it that way, or the story behind why you do it that way is. So
How do
there's
you discover
just
that,
always
though?
this.
Like,
Well-
is it just be like you need to go some counseling or therapy or something, and have someone like kind of help figure that out?
No,
or-
but, so that's really that's the philosophy behind my approach, which is, I call it the red thread. It's a phrase that's borrowed from Europeans, and they use it to refer to the thing that makes things all make sense, the thing that connects everything, like the logical flow of argument of something. And it's got a great backstory, by the way, but we can talk about that later. But to me, like, the reason why I call it that is because, my thinking was that, and this all developed when I was first working with TEDx Cambridge. So I was executive producer of TEDx Cambridge, which is one of only 9 legacy level TEDx events in the world. And I was trying to figure out, like, how do we take these really complicated ideas and get them across in 3 to 18 minutes? And I was like, well, okay, they have these great ideas. We process information as story. Can I take the idea and break it down into the story elements? And then in both ways, A, not only will we have a better understanding of the idea, but B, we'll have a built-in way to talk about it because it's already in story structure. Turns out that works. So, 5 years later and literally hundreds of people later and companies later, like, it actually does work. And the thing is that each one of those pieces is a window into your worldview. So the fact that you choose to work with this group of people and not that group of people. So just even think of it as, do you like to work with skeptics or do you like to work with people who are converts? Like, that's just there are some people who just, I'm a last mile kind of person. Like, I love working with people who are just like, they can see the end line and they're just like, but how? And then I know people who love to be the person that's pushing somebody over the beginning, over the start line. That's one place that you can differentiate right there. Then what question do you answer for those people? Where is that perspective difference that you see? Where is that gap that you solve that's closed, that you always want to close? What are those values, beliefs, those silent assumptions I was talking about that really guide what you do? Each of those, that's why I developed this, which is it was really meant to be, this is the minimum that you can do. I've made it as simple as it could be and no simpler. It's like, if you can answer particularly the 4 questions, like, what's the goal? What's the 2-part problem? What's that truth? And what does that all add up to? What's the change? Then you will have an incredible insight into your own worldview. Because only you will answer those questions just that way.
Yeah, this is so good because we help creators like formulate what we call the value proposition, which is like your what and your why behind for your channel. Like, if you had to tell someone in one simple sentence what you were doing on your channel, what you offered on your channel, how would you say it? And every once in a while I get a creator who is like, their value proposition, I'm like, it's technically a what and a why, but I'm like, there's something that's missing there. And I feel like now I know what it is. It's like the way that they do what they do, or why they do it the way that they do it. I'm like, yes, that's been the missing key, because every time I can think of like so many times when I've clicked on a creator on any social platform, and they explain it in a certain way that I'm like, oh, I've never heard it explained that way. And like Tim was kind of saying, where it's like this like, oh, I didn't know that I needed that, and I didn't know that I needed it that way. And then you fall in love with the creator that way. So I feel like it's going to be so powerful.
Oh, absolutely. And, the change, I use it as the change just because it allows it to be universal, but in marketing applications, it's 100% your value proposition. By the time you get to the change, that is your value proposition, because you're like, this is, and that through line I was talking about, that's the summary of it. So, when yesterday, in the yesterday example, when I showed an after of a message, and, I said it was Made of Air, as the company produces the negative emissions materials you need to reach net zero. That's their value proposition, there in a sentence. Which doesn't mean a lot necessarily to a lot of people, but that's really what it comes down to, is just can you state what people want, via a means they don't expect? That's the most powerful value proposition you can put out there.
And I feel like it challenges creators to think about, like, if they haven't thought about even the way that they do it, you know what I'm saying? It's now challenging them to think about not only the way that I want to present this information or teach somebody or whatever it may be, but now I also need to think about why I want to teach them the way that I want to teach them, and because I can't think of any creators who would even like, I guess actively think like, or there's very few that would actively think like, oh, I do it this way for this reason. Right.
Yeah, I haven't really thought of it
or even
much.
that I just do it this way because I like doing it this way.
Yeah.
Like they don't even think about the way that they do it. They just think about what they do and why they do it.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was talking about yesterday. It's like, whether you want to call them silent assumptions or, like I said, I like to think about it as lines of code, like it's your operating system. It never occurs to you to open up that control window and look at your lines of code.
Yeah.
You're like, well, this is just the way that I do it. I never think about why.
Yeah.
But it's the why you do it that way.
Yes.
It's the why behind your how that's intriguing to people.
Yes.
That's what's different.
And that creates the emotion. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Delana, let's say, I'm curious to hear how you would apply this to like a video. So let's say Delana does a lot of videos on like YouTube analytics, and here's how you read the analytics and the stats you should use and what they mean and things like that. So say you're making one of those. Is this something that you feel like should apply to like every video like that, or is this like it just needs to come out somehow? Like, this is why I look at data this way and go through those 3 questions, or is it more like it just kind of needs to be on channel art, like a banner like thing, and people can get it in the channel trailer, but it doesn't necessarily have to be in every video? Or how do we take this and like use it? Does that make sense? What would you do if you were making that analytic video? Would you be like, I'm going to insert it in here?
I would, but I would do that because whenever it comes to talking about data, so many people want to remove the emotion from it.
Yeah,
and they just want to look at it as numbers or SEO or whatever. And so I try to, whenever I talk about that stuff, like always tie it back to the human and like say, you need to look at these numbers this way because it's going to tell you this, this, and that. And don't look at it this way because you can also take it this other way. You need to look at it this way because this is what you need to take away from it. Right. And so whenever talking about data, I would 100% always try to tie that in because of the tendencies of where people
So is that a principle then you would say, like, hey, anyone who's like listening, like any video you do, like always come back to those things? Or is it more of a like when it makes sense, do it, but don't force a square peg into a round hole?
I think it needs to feel like an underlying message, like in everything. Like I don't think it needs to be
explicitly stated.
Like you would like state your value proposition. I don't think.
No, I wouldn't do that every time. Okay. But I think that I think we underestimate how quickly and effectively you can make a case for why you're doing something a certain way. And, so I don't think you need to state the value proposition of your whole being every time in every video. But I am convinced that people need to hear that, at the bare minimum, that kind of element conclusion. They need, and what you're saying, like, look at it this way because, right, you want this other thing. Like that. People need to hear that. So I do agree. I think, so whenever I do videos, please, and now I'm like super nervous about my own YouTube channel.
Well, we can help you with that.
I'm judging you.
I'm sure you can. I do, so just both as a test, but also as a demonstration, I've been doing a literally short series of videos that I call Message in a Minute. And then I do a longer newsletter, blog post, article that kind of takes it. And I'm starting with just that red thread because I'm trying to point out that you only need a minute or minute and a half to get someone to go, and if you just have those elements in it, you can do that. With those videos, I've chosen only to do that minute piece, and then I do the longer version of it like written. But I think that really any time that you are presenting or creating content, because I see this as a speaker, you have a choice about how much case making you do before you give the detail on how to do it. So for instance, the talk that I gave yesterday was by time, literally 2/3 making the case and then 1/3 how to do it.
Yeah.
Right. And because you all saw it. I showed a slap chop infomercial at 30 minutes. That's literally when it went. It was 30 minutes. It was a 45-minute talk. So the last 15 minutes was breaking it down and how do you actually do that thing. But it took a half an hour to get from, hey, you're trying to use your marketing to drive action from people to, we need to create this moment of truth, and then that last piece. But I have a talk, and this is true for even when I'm writing my blog posts too, but I have a talk where I get through that red thread of it in the first 3 minutes, and the rest of it is how. Because it's just like, it's a recap, right? I mean, remember I was saying you can decide whether you're preaching to the converted or to the skeptics?
Yeah.
The skeptics are the ones like
that need the 30 minutes.
They're the ones that are going to need the 30 minutes. They're going to need
time.
more of the case making. And think of those more as the educational ones, right? Where you're trying to just get across a big concept.
Yeah.
But your tactical videos, it still helps, I think, to have that piece right in the beginning where you're like, right, you want this? This is why we're doing it. We're going to do it. Okay, now I'm going to show you how.
Yeah.
And it can take 30 seconds, not even that. You just want to level set. But it doesn't have to be your, like, this is why I exist on this earth value proposition.
Every time.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so then once we get the emotion going, then that's what makes it more likely for people to be like, oh, I want more, I want to watch more, whatever the action might be, which is watch another video or subscribe or comment, or it's like go to my website and buy, download, sign up, register, whatever type of thing, right? And so this is like the foundational part of like, here's how you spark some emotion as opposed to just giving people information about who you are, what you do. This is how you spark the emotion so that then they will then take the action that you want.
Yeah, because I think to what you were saying earlier, and you guys are just producing all sorts of fun new ideas for me today. I think we not only do we think that logic and emotion in either or, we also I think tend to think them as serial, right? Like let's get the logic, then we'll get the emotion, then we'll get the logic.
Right.
Yeah.
And I actually think you have to be talking to both of them simultaneously.
I agree.
And that's why story structure to me is so powerful, because it is both simultaneously.
It is, yep.
It's a logical structure.
Yep.
It's literally a logical argument. A story is a logical argument. But the pieces and the order that they're coming in create emotion. They create discomfort. They create hope. They create joy. They create resolution.
Your
they
guard
create
comes
conflict.
down. You're more receptive
Absolutely.
to information you otherwise would have been repulsed by. Yeah.
And so when you get to, so when you open up a question, with curiosity, and then you introduce a problem, there's like, oh no. And you're like, but this is true. They're like, oh yay, but I don't know how to do it. And you're like, oh, but I know how to do it. Here, I'm going to show you how to do it. And then you're like, and look, that solves your problem. They feel awesome.
They're like, oh. Yeah.
And then one of the things that I talk about is to add, well, I call it the goal revisited, but it's basically like a bonus, a free prize, the cherry on top. Once you can show somebody, hey, you're looking for X, I've given you X, then you have the permission to be able to go, and do you notice that you also have gained A, B, and C from this as well? And then what you've just done there is now you've created curiosity for the next thing. You've painted the picture for what's possible beyond what they've gotten.
Yeah.
And a lot of times what we do, like in sales and marketing, and I think just in anything, is that we try to put all that stuff up front. Like we try to put everything that someone's going to get right up front.
That's true, actually.
But they're not looking for that.
Yeah.
It's
No,
like
I
trying
just
to
want this one thing.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like I had someone ask me a question right after the talk yesterday. They were like, well, so you're saying not to have like all the different things that we can do for people right on the front page, or all the benefits, all the value propositions? I'm like, how effectively are you going to catch a ball if I throw 12 of them at you at the same time?
Usually the way we ask that is when we have some that we're like, oh yeah, how's that working for you so far?
Yeah.
And that's all we have to say. They're like, otherwise you wouldn't be talking to
That's
me.
right. But the reason is you can't catch 12 things at once.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, and she's like, well, I could catch one. I'm like, could you though? Because I think you're going to be looking at like
you're gonna
all
be
the
like,
other 12,
Yeah.
and I think that's what happens. And I think that's what happens when we try to say right up front, here's the 12 things you're going to get. And it's just kind of like, but I only want the one thing.
People just want the benefit, the reward. They don't care like if there's 12 things I get there or 2 things I get there.
They do once they've gotten there, right? Once they say, okay, I've got a problem, and you're like, oh, and I have a solution.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, now it's only after they understand and agree and accept your solution that they're going to be remotely interested in the extra benefits.
Yeah.
But once they are at that point, those extra benefits serve a really important purpose. They validate that decision to act.
It's making me think of a story of I'm trying to blank out his name, but Rudis. Blake Rudis, yeah. So he goes through one of our programs.
Oh, yeah.
And then
Okay.
and he learns like, oh, this is how I connect with people on video, and because he was doing Photoshop tutorials and how to like color grade video, like very how to step 1, step 2, step 3. And so he starts putting like the human emotion stuff in, the connection things that great people like feel something really quick. And then he took those same principles, was working on his channel, and he's like, I'm gonna try this on my webinar. And he said for the first time, he's like, this webinar, as soon as I started doing it, like when I went to the sales pitch, he said it crashed his sales server.
Oh my gosh.
Like the server went down.
That's amazing.
He's like, hold on, go get it online again, and then come back. And he's like, in the first several minutes, I sold more than I've ever sold in like an entire webinar ever before, like the first 4 minutes or something like that. And it was because people felt something and they had like this epiphany moment and it made sense, and the trust level was deeper because now I feel something with you, and like all those things. So all really good.
And I think the key is, it's part of the reason why I do what I do the way that I do it is because a lot of the people that I've worked with throughout my career are people who are fundamentally not comfortable with emotions. So I work with a lot of technologists and founders and engineers, and even what's fascinating about where we are with creators right now is a lot of them are kind of not necessarily creators by choice. They're actually kind of technical people first, and there's this creative piece that comes after. Like I remember watching my friend Brian Fanzo the other day, and he was like rejected the label of creator for most of his life because he's like, no, I'm a tech guy, and yet he's creating all the time. But that was part of my idea with this too, which was, if you just understand the structure of something, if you understand the structure that satisfies both logic and emotion, you understand the structure of story, and you put your information in the structure of a story, then you don't ever have to tell a story. You don't ever actually have to do anything where you're like, well, when I was 7, I had a dog named Daisy, and she died. Right? Like, you don't ever have to do something like that to like, you don't have to go through all of that. You can do something that's much more naturally comfortable to you.
Yeah.
I mean, what's funny to me is that a bunch of people came up to me yesterday after the keynote, and they're like, I love your storytelling. And I actually didn't tell a single story in that whole talk. And so it was a really interesting, I was just fascinated by that because I was like, because there literally was no.
Well, you use personal examples that's helped us connect with you.
But there wasn't any like story, right? Where it was like, all right, let me tell you about this time where I was just like.
But that's the thing, like, so one of the things that we do on our podcast, not this one, but normally Delaney and I and whoever we're out, if we have someone else on our team.
Am I breaking your format? I'm sorry.
Oh, no. We'll just do like a little like, hey, what's going on in your world? Like, how are you doing? Like a quick little catch up. And we have people like, why do you keep doing that? I'm like, no, they're like, I like, it has nothing to do with the topic. And all I want to do is like, just get to the content. Like, I don't care about Delena's house that she's buying and the new floors that she's putting in. And Tim, what you're doing with your chickens outside. And we're like, but you didn't skip it, did you? And they're like, oh, you're right.
Yeah, I got into a consultation with a creator, and he was like, I have some feedback for you guys. He was like, can you just get to the point faster in the podcast? And he was like, he proceeded then to list every single thing that we had talked about in those conversations. And then he goes, but it works.
Because now you feel something. So we don't do it for long, but what you did yesterday was more like you threw in like, here's a picture of my dog, my Greyhound, and it's Greyhound, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And so like, that's a little connection point, even though you're giving us information, but there's like, there's a little connection point there. And there's like making fun of something that we all would make fun of too, another little connection point. So I think that's what when they think story, but you're thinking now, this is just how we interact as humans, and we get on a stage. I think it may be like our mostly Greek Western approach to education has been like, you strip out all the human stuff, you give them 3 bullet points, put them on a stage, you take notes, and you go home, you're like, that was boring. That's not what you did.
And the 3 bullet points, they all
start with the same letter too, by the way.
Jeez.
Alliteration.
Oh my gosh. It's just not how we
No, it's
process
not.
information.
No.
And it's just not. And so I think that particularly when it comes to creators, like I adore creators. Like the whole reason why I studied what I did in my life and why I was always in between the two is because I wanted to do something in my life that made it easier for passionate people to have a practical existence, right? I mean, I love artists, but I did not, and I loved being in the arts, but I also didn't have the hustle to be an artist, and I knew it. You know, I probably didn't have the talent either, but I didn't have the hustle, and I was just like, there's got to be a way to make this easier for people, and that's it. Like the thing is that it feels like a work in the beginning, but once you figured it out, once you found that kind of core, everything just starts to make sense about your life and why you do what you do the way that you do it. And what I found over and over again is that I mean, I'm doing this action with my hand where I'm like kind of dropping it down, but it's like it's a settling into who you are and why you create rather than a projection of what you wish it were. And I think when people and creators struggle, particularly with some kind of public persona, it's because they're trying to put something out forward of themselves rather than something that actually is
trying to project
of
who
themselves.
you want to be or who you wish you were
Who you
versus
think
who
you
you
need to
actually
be.
are.
Where you think right, exactly.
And that requires a good level of self-awareness and
Vulnerability.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's hard. But the other option is not sustainable.
Yes.
It isn't.
It
We
isn't.
see that all the time.
Yep,
But
burnout.
the other way, your way,
Yeah.
which is way more healthier, but it feels way more scary because of the vulnerability. Like, what if this is who I truly am and it's rejected?
It's
what
not,
if those
though.
mean comments? You know, like,
No, it's not.
It's not. I mean, I have yet to find work with someone on finding their red thread and be like, yeah, that one's crap. I mean, that just doesn't happen. Like,
I know, but it feels
Yeah.
like, what if I put this out there and it's rejected?
Yeah.
You know, not that
It's more intimidating.
Not that it.
I hear you. Yeah. I mean, for me, that's why everything I do really starts with who you're for.
Yeah.
Because who you're for, and that's how I describe it, everything you put out there is a signal out to those people, right? It's like it's back in the days of radio waves, right? It's basically saying I am sending out a signal that is tuned to this kind of person, and these are the kind of people that I want to tune in. These are the kind of people that I want to come to me. And what I found with folks that are nervous about that is that when it's grounded in I'm for these people, and everything that I'm doing is to open the path to make it easier for those people to find me.
To focus on them, not on yourself.
Yeah,
Sure.
exactly.
Okay,
and then and to
Yeah.
really be thinking, because where failure happens, whereas you're putting everything out there and kind of hoping, right? Where
Yeah.
you're trying to sell yourself.
Yeah.
And to me, marketing creation is really about making it easier for the right people, your people, to find you.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that frame can make it a lot less scary because
it does.
Yeah.
it's like, well, anybody who rejects you, well, then that by definition means that those are not your people.
Your people. Yeah.
Just tell them
that's
where they
good.
can shove it and you move on.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because I made some choices yesterday with like some of the examples that I showed, and I know that in one case it was an eHarmony commercial that represented a same-sex couple. That was important to me to show that kind of inclusivity, and I think there may have been people in the audience where they weren't enamored by that, and where I was comfortable with it is like, I have no issue with it. For the people I want to work with, they will have no issue with it.
It's kind of what we talk about with primal branding. So you're non-believers, just the people who are not you.
Yeah.
And you have if you want your audience to stand with you, you have to take a stand for something.
Correct.
And if you don't take a stand for something, then like that's one of the things that makes your audience, your community actually weaker, is because you don't take a stand for something.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then people are like, okay, they don't know what that you believe or why or anything like that, right? So it's
And it's not. It feels safer to keep that stuff out,
does,
but it's
but
actually
Yeah.
much more dangerous.
it
Yes.
is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Totally
Yeah,
agree.
yeah.
It's so funny how we're like, as human beings, we like so love and appreciate when somebody else is so authentically themselves, but we will not let ourselves do that.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
We just won't let ourselves go there so often. And it literally like kills your soul.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah, that gap. I mean, like I said, that's why I said it's not sustainable. That gap of trying to hold up something, I mean, that isn't you, that isn't true, that isn't completely aligned with who you are, is exhausting. And you're also constantly trying to, while you're doing that, you're ignoring all of this like lifetime of strength that you've built doing the things the way that you do them. Like, again, you already do things a certain way. And all I'm doing with the work that I do is putting words on that. So it's not making you into something else. Yeah. And it's actually, part of why I do what I do is because I've never had someone fail to see the power in the way that they do something as a result. Yeah. Because once you start to put those things together, you just get to this point, you're like, oh my gosh, well, either nobody else is serving these people, or nobody else is serving them this way, or people don't look at it this way, or they don't come at it from this direction. And then they understand actually that by and large, their view, their ideas are way bigger than they thought.
Yeah.
But it's never a surprise to me because it's just a product of like, you've been living out this story in one way or another your entire life. Yeah. These muscles are really, really strong. Why wouldn't you use your strongest set of muscles to move you forward in the world? Why would you use the weakest ones? Yeah.
Well, we at Vid Summit, Peter McKinnon did the closing speech for the whole event. Do you know who Peter McKinnon is?
I don't.
Okay, he's a big YouTuber. He does like photography.
I just know the
stuff.
ones that my kids watch.
That's
like
okay.
Lil Simsy, that's their favorite. She's their favorite.
Well, he did a speech to close out the whole event, and I think he spoke for probably like 45 minutes. And the entire time, like we were getting probably around the 35, 40 minute mark, and he hadn't given a single piece of advice yet. He had only told story after story after story. And by the time he got to the like 40-minute mark, I was like, okay, I see what you're doing here. and then at the end of it, he said exactly what I thought he was going to say. And he was like, all of you guys were so locked into every single thing. He was like, I could see it on your faces. And we were like, I was sitting there and I was like, I don't think I missed one thing he said, and his whole point is he was like, the only thing that you need to do to grow your social platforms is to create human connection. Yeah. And he was like, and so that's why he told just story after story after story the whole time, because it brought people in. Yeah. And then he got to tie it around the whole time. And I just think that this is adding like a whole other layer to the thing that he laid out there, and like helping people actually get to that point.
Yeah, because I think the idea of story and connection is scary for people, and not just because of the vulnerable piece of it. They just don't know where to start.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, I think that, if I were to apply that same process I've been talking about to myself, I would say that, the kind of weird skill set that I've put together in my life is just, it's always about bridging that gap. It's always about operationalizing something. Because I'm somebody who helps people in the last mile, I like to close the gap between aspiration and reality. And my brain works to create frameworks and processes. And so it's like, okay, I get it. You want to make this connection. You want to do these things. It's really scary for you. What is the least scary way that I can help you make that connection? And it turns out that, having people answer just some basic questions about why they do what they do, again, not in like deep therapy kind of ways, but just like, okay, well, what question are you answering for your audience? All right, well, why are they, what are they doing right now? Why isn't that the right thing? Why is this the right way? That actually just really kind of innocuous questions like that reveal incredible depth and incredible differentiation for people. And I'm really passionate about like helping people pull that out, because it's there,
Yep.
and whether that came from, well, I don't know, who knows where that came from, but but what's exciting about hearing about what Peter was doing is that, we are so wired for story. There's a whole book about it.
Right.
That even if you just tell a story and never attach a lesson to it, people will always draw their own lessons from it. If it were a story, if
you
it's
read
a
yourself into it.
Yeah.
right, and if it's a properly constructed story, like if it's not just an anecdote, right?
Or a
like
series of events or
right,
something.
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
If it's showing like that transformation from state A to state B, people will draw their own lessons.
Yeah.
And sometimes those are the most powerful
Yes.
things to do.
Yep.
Thank you so much for
my
sharing
gosh,
all
you're
this.
welcome.
Yeah, we got way more
Yeah.
than this. Thank
Yeah,
you.
this
We
was
were gonna get.
awesome.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I love just listening to that conversation again. Like, so many things are coming up. Each time I hear it, I've listened to it about 3 times now. I'm like, oh, I need to do that. Oh, like new stuff keeps popping up for me. So good. You guys definitely go check out Tamsen if you are more interested in what she does, and maybe you want to reach out to her to help you grow your brand. And you can go to her website. There's a link to it down in the show notes below. It's also just tamsenwebster.com, and check out her books. And that's actually how I want to wrap up this week's episode. Every week we wrap up with a power tip, something practically you can do on your channel going forward to see better results. And this week's power tip is for you to read her book. Find Your Red Thread is the name of her book. The subtitle is Make Your Big Ideas Irresistible. And there's a link to that book also in the show notes down below. You can go check it out and listen to the audiobook now that is now available. I just checked as I was recording this. It is available. You can go listen to the audiobook. If you're like me, I don't get through a lot of paper books, but me and Audible are like BFFs, right? So go check it out. And then finally, I would love for you to join us in our this episode's after party on an app called Volley. We love to discuss these types of things, and not just these things in our episodes, but other things revolving around our business and our audiences and what we're doing on YouTube and things. So it's a great way to just have some video chat conversations with, at this point, like over 650 other creators are in there. So I want to invite you to join us as well. Use the link in the show notes, or go to videocreators.com/pod squad. Yes, that's what we're calling ourselves here now, the Pod Squad. Videocreators.com/Pod Squad. And we'd love to have you in there and just talk about, like, hey, what stood out to us in this episode, and what questions do we have, and what comments, like, we're in this conversation there, what were the things we really wish we could say? That's what Volley is helping us do. So videocreators.com/Pod Squad. I'm looking forward to meeting you and hearing your questions and hearing your responses to things like this and everything else the community is talking about there. So go check it out. We'll see you there. And thank you guys for hanging out. We'll see you again next week for another Video Creators Podcast episode. See you then. Bye.